This is the Pawn Sacrifice channel and a quick breakout session. So I've been going through doing the wiring on the car for many reasons, mostly me spending a lot of time looking and seeing how things work, and also finding out that the connectors that I've ordered aren't quite the right ones and having to change stuff around. So it's just been, as has been happening a lot lately, pushing things back and back. What I have found though is I've been filming here, I've been trying to explain the basics of electrics and what I've been doing as I've gone, but I think it's just going to end up being a massive video otherwise if I don't take it out. So what I want to do now is just quickly run through some of the main things that I'm using, what's useful to have, and then I want to just go through and explain some of the basics around relays, because that's kind of the complicated bit that I didn't understand, including how the DME relay works, because I'm repurposing that for this. So yeah, let's just run through a few of the basics now. This is a multimeter, so this is a really basic one. It was about £15–20 however many years ago that I bought it, so it's not the most expensive thing. You can get some really nice ones if you really need it. The main thing I've been using this for, in addition to testing voltage, is just the continuity tester. So this little thing down the bottom here, and essentially what happens is when you connect it to a cable, you should get a beep, and that should zero out. Ooh, although it's not really liking to focus. There you go. And essentially what that tells you is that there's a good connection between the 2 points. So when I'm troubleshooting things that I've done on the engine, it allows you to understand what's what when I'm going through the wiring loom and trying to see which point on the ECU connects to which thing, so I can reference other stuff. Then that's really handy there. Which brings me on to the second thing that's really useful, and that is the Hens manual for the wiring diagram for this engine, and then also the wiring diagrams for the 944 that I got off Pelican Parts. That was very useful. So that's great. With all of that, one thing which is quite handy to have, but you don't need it, is a label maker. So because I don't really know what I'm doing, and because VW Audi use a lot of the same connectors over and over again, I'm being very meticulous about labelling everything as I go. Light bulbs. So I just use 12 volt light bulbs. So if I'm looking to test something, if I want to complete a circuit, without having to plug everything in, or get the part plugged in, like at the moment, for example, not having the wiring loom on, what I can do is just connect up a light bulb, and then to test the switch you just push the button and you make sure everything comes on. You can test the continuity between points, but testing continuity won't, for example, tell you if the relay's set up in the right way. Stanley wire crimping set, so automatic or wire strippers, which just you just lock the wire in, it does it really neatly and a lot better than me faffing around with knives or snippers. And then these is just a ratchet crimping set, and it has different teeth on it for different types of connectors. Again, that's proved to be really useful. Obviously still not without pliers and snippers. Then something else which is a relatively cheap buy, I think this only cost a few pounds, but I just got a packet of crocodile clips. They're really handy, so if you're trying to work out what goes where, or test circuits, or different things, then yeah, they're really useful for just popping on here and there. They are quite thin, so you can't put a lot of amps through them. A collection of wiring. I've actually got quite a lot of different stuff, so we've got everything from the massive wires cable that is going to be used for the main power and going to the starter motor, where it's drawing a lot of amps, to stuff that's frankly very thin, and I've even got some smaller reels. Again, in terms of sizing, I try and match what's on the original loom in terms of size, because that's obviously what the factory specified. Look at the diagrams, if that specifies it, great. Otherwise, good tip, or what I've found quite useful, is actually going back and having a look and seeing what the relays are rated for, so that gives you an idea of what the maximum is going to be, or looking at the fuse boards and just having a look and see what the rating for the fuses are. Even if it's the wrong engine, just go on, do a quick search and bring up the fuse layout for that, and it will tell you, you know, the circuit that you're trying to use, how many amps that's going to be using. So connectors, again, pay attention to the amps, pay attention to the use. Is it going to be internal? Is it going to be external to the cabin? In terms of how waterproof you're going to need those to be. Heat shrink. So for heat shrink, I've got a couple of different lots. I've got these small little sections, and I've got some bigger stuff which goes up to quite large size. Just for that, the thing to be mindful of there is the sizing and also the shrink rate. A lot of it is 2:1. Some of the stuff that I've got is 3:1 because I need to get them over quite big things on the connectors, but then I want it to go down quite a bit smaller. We'll go through this in more detail, but essentially you've got a few different types of these. I say few, the third type is a bit of a catch-all, but essentially 4-pin, which does one operation, 5-pin, which has 2 main configurations, and then something like the Porsche DME Relay, which does a bunch of different, or it does 2 different controls off of the same relay. I've got a relay here, which I've just taken the top of, so you can kind of see there's the coil, and on there you've got the little trigger which just moves back and forth, and I'll just basically show you that now, how that works. And you know, 9-volt battery, you can stick this on your tongue and it tingles. Don't stick it on your tongue, but I've done that as a child, and yeah, that can operate the relay. Obviously it's not going to do anything, particularly, you know, in modern cars it's not going to drive xenon headlights, which can give you quite a serious electric shock. So it removes you from all of that. So let's have a quick look. So here we have the demo rig. So relay is exposed. We'll zoom on this in a second, but we've got the negative power, which is the ground, which is coming down to the table, which simulates going through the car body. We've got the power that's going into the relay, which isn't doing anything at the moment, and then we've got the trigger. So essentially this is me putting the key, or turning the key in the ignition and making the connection, and you'll hear the slight cold shake, but essentially it's closed the circuit and allowed the power to flow through to the bulb. So that little clicking noise there is the relay switching on and off, and you can, if you hear a buzzing noise at all, sometimes when you try and operate something, then there's a chance that there's a faulty relay, or if you're switching something on and you're not hearing relays clicking, then again there's a chance the faulty relay or problem in the circuit. So now that that's done, let's have a look at these different types of relays in a bit more detail. We'll just run through the diagrams and what they mean. So let's kick off with this, the most basic of relays. So this is a 12-volt 40-amp relay, as it says on there, and then it's got a little diagram to show you how it works. So essentially with this, what happens is you get the power coming in on terminal 30. That's a fairly standard numbering. Pin 85, and sometimes this is 85 or 86, but on pin 85 on this one you've got the ground. So this is a permanent ground going to the coil, and then what happens is we have pin 86, which is the switch live. So imagine you turn the ignition key round, it's activated the power's come into the coil, and then the coil activates and then triggers what we saw just now, which is the little thing clicking over from one position to another, and then that creates the circuit and allows the power to go out through 87. In this instance I'm going to be using this setup so that when you turn the key on, sends power to the engine coil and it's just ready to go. So as and when it starts receiving signals from the ECU, coil's going to do their thing, firing the spark. So if we now look at this next one, this is changeover relay, I think it's called. Essentially it's just got an extra pin there, as you can see, which is 87A, and this works very similarly to the other one. So you've got the power coming in on 30, but this is a normally closed circuit on 87A, so even with nothing happening with the coil, so when the coil itself is deactivated, the relay is routing power through from 30 to 87A. So whatever you have at 87A, when the coil is deactivated, that will be getting the power. Then when we add our power source to 86, activating the coil, and it's not animated, but you see it then does the clicky thing and switches the power over to 87. So this is going to have a normally closed circuit, and it will just switch over when the coil is activated. What I'm going to try and use this for the sensor on the brake fluid reservoir, because it's a BMW one. The way that it works with the Porsche one, it switches opposite, so the light's coming on when it's at the right level, the warning light goes off when it drops below, so I need to just basically reverse that, and I'm going to try and do that using this kind of relay setup. The next one we have is the Porsche DME Relay, the slightly unaligned. A lot of these people think these things are unreliable. I've not found them to be too bad. I think I've had one go over the years. Just keep a spare in the glove box. I want to reuse this, and it's even with factory stuff, it's important to understand how it works, because I'm going to be making changes to the wiring so that certain points of this work with the VW Audi engine but still do the job that it was supposed to. So again, we can see it's a 12 volt 15 amp relay, and as we should expect by now, we've got the power coming in on 30 and it's not doing anything. And then you'll see there's two sections of coils. So the one on the right, the ground is there on 85, and then we're putting a signal through 86. So again, we've turned the key, that activates the coil, and that triggers the relay motion, and that sends power out to 87. In this instance, that power is then going out to fuel injectors, and just basically they're active. So similar to what I said about the coils, they've now got power and they're just waiting for signals to tell them what they need to do. You'll also notice though that with 87 it's also serving as a power source to the second coil. And what we've got here, so when you're activating the coils in relays, you can do it using switch positive or switch ground. This instance it's using switch ground on 85B. The ECU sends a signal through to the coil, so it says, right, okay, yeah, we want to activate the coil, releasing the flow of energy going out through pin 4, 87B. This goes off to run the fuel pump. The reason for doing it this way is that you need the fuel injectors to be active and getting power before the fuel pump starts running, which is a good safety check, which is why I quite like this setup. And that's pretty much relays. Okay, so bit of a rattle through. I think it's probably fairly obvious, a lot of this for most people. I think the main thing to understand is the relays and how to read those. So, you know, with the DME relay, because I'm reusing that, so I'm changing what's happening with the wire that's feeding the coils, and also I'm changing the trigger over. I need to understand how that works and where to take those off, so that's useful to know. But yeah, other than that, all I can say is just spend the time getting to know the wiring, know how it works and where things go. It looks intimidating, but it really isn't. So first off, apologies to anyone who thinks that any of that is the bleeding obvious. I'm surprised you're still watching at this point if that's the case. If there's anything I've missed or not mentioned, then let me know below, or if there's other ways of doing things which you prefer, again let me know. This is kind of my voyage of discovery and what I've found as I've gone through. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a good sense of how I've gone about it, some of the things that I've used that have made my life a lot easier as I've been going through this. The main thing, and I know I keep saying this, is just spend the time getting to know the wiring, how it works, what things do, what's important, what you can remove when you're not using things. Some of the tools, stuff that's made my life easier. But yeah, I've spent so much time poring over the wiring and the wiring diagrams and just seeing where everything went. You know, check your circuits, make sure you've got continuity across everything, make sure you're connecting things properly and well. Don't just be winding things up and putting a bit of tape around it, crimp things on, make sure everything's done properly, check your amp ratings, and the voltage is pretty much going to be 12 volt for everything on a car, so don't worry about that too much. Yeah, and just don't be afraid of it. Be thorough, but don't be afraid of it. So I got things arriving today, so which will allow me to get on, and hopefully before too long I'm going to have the loom redone and everything plugged in, and we can have another look at starting it. Thanks for watching.